We are moving on with leveraging AI, artificial intelligence, in a digital media. We have a panel coming up for you guys right now. Business professionals across various industries start to embrace data-driven decision-making and begin to experience the power of precision available at their fingertips. More marketers are turning to artificial intelligence to improve the efficiency of their media placements. Disruption in this space is being driven by media and publishing mergers and acquisitions, an ever-increasing programmatic inventory supply, availability of smart audience behavioral targeting, and also automated and intelligent software tools. So how should marketers embrace these changes to improve their targeting, reach, and conversion funnels? We're going to find that out in the next half an hour. So, as a highly driven digital strategist with a mix of international client-side and agency background, our next presenter and presenters is a creative, energetic, and highly strategic person in his thinking. He embraces the digital age and is on the forefront of identifying and interpreting emerging trends. He comes with a rare competency to transcend the traditional advertising, social media, and technical execution functions of the digital domain. And he also likes using very long words. So we're going to introduce him. So joining for the panel, managing partner of Frontiering, who I was just describing, Ian Farmer, will be his guests. Priscilla Prenhalto, who's from Geronimo Mobile, and Scott Ward from Digital Infusions. Please welcome our panel.
Welcome guys, thank you for joining me. So we're going to talk today about
an overview of AR features. Hopefully you'll get at the end of this session an overview of AR features in marketing, particularly in media, discuss some of the disruptions that are happening, and some applications and insights. And so hopefully that you'll be able to walk away with some key actions you can take to leverage AI within marketing. So I've got Priscilla here, whose background is she spent a lot of time at Fairfax and News, and then with the Daily Mail, and kind of 6 years at Mamma Mia. So represents the publishing side of media in a great way. And Scott is from Digital Infusions and has been doing a lot of disruption stuff with companies in terms of re-engineering how they work. A lot of that includes AI, and he's got some great stories to tell in that regard. So let's start off by saying AI is everywhere. You're probably already using AI. If you're using Google Maps or Netflix to get recommendations, Spotify, there's lots of AI. We saw just before lunch with Samantha that ever-increasing AR used in AI. But what's some other examples of AI? So Scott's going to talk about this one.
Yeah, look, there's. I think AI is just such an exciting topic at the moment, and it's something that's extremely topical. It's got a lot of momentum, but there's also this really sort of ambiguous definition of what is AI. And I think when you start to break it down, we think it's this autonomous sort of freestanding intelligence, and actually it's not. But I thought one of the really interesting case studies that's happened over the last sort of period has actually been the Cambridge Analytica stuff, in terms of offering a little bit of a high watermark in the world that we're in today. Like, where is it up to? I mean, from a marketing perspective, it's a phenomenal campaign. And in watching it unfold, it's now beautifully documented. And I don't know about you guys, but I particularly was horrified at the way that they were using technology in one sense, and then the part of me that has aspirations for world domination was actually in complete, just in awe of what they did. But where it originated was, and I think it's just an interesting sort of case study piece, is they came out of some research at Cambridge University, where they had this hypothesis around, can our digital systems or our digital selves be used to predict character traits more effectively than, say, what people can? To unpick that, what they did was they created these psychological surveys that looked at 5 different sort of character types. They surveyed something like, I think it was 72,000 people. They then got their friends to report back or to judge on what they thought their character traits would be, and then they compared that to their digital footprint. Now, what was really fascinating was the results of that PhD piece ended up becoming the foundations of Cambridge Analytica. The results from 72,000 people, they created these signatures around to look at digital profiles. And so, you had these, be they personas or whatever, but these unique signatures that were actually able to give away traits around the things that people enjoyed. So some of the stuff they found out was, if you like curly French fries as opposed to straight French fries, you're more likely to have a higher IQ. Or if you expressed a like of Kit Kats, you're more likely to vote left than right. And they ended up using this to start to present content. So from a original pool of 72,000, they ended up reaching something like 87 million accounts across Facebook, which for me I think is a pretty good ROI, right? But what they discovered through this process is that not only are digital footprints more accurate in judging what we're going to respond to, in fact, they discovered that not only is it more accurate than what your friends will say, it's almost about equivalent to what your spouse will predict in terms of what you find interesting. So I think and there's a lot in that case study, I think, around, we've got this knowledge, to draw these signatures out around what are the traits, what are the things that we're looking for, and we can then start to echo that out and start to do testing off that. And I think it's, as a marketing piece, and some of the things we're going to go into next, it actually stands as a nice high watermark to think about, well, what is it that we want out of this process? How can we use those insights, preferably for good, but not necessarily. How can they serve the things that we're looking for?
Great. And of course, there's a government change happening right now, #LibSpill, as I understand. Okay, so media is getting smarter. This is a startup out of the UK where this billboard has a camera in it, and it actually has facial recognition and puts your picture onto the billboard to try and say you something, which is probably ultra personalisation. It's officemoments.co.uk, which is kind of scary, but that's probably where we're heading. Now let's have a look at what are the rise of AI. How do we get here? Because AI has been around since 1949, when 1984 was written. But what are some of the factors that have influenced where we are today? I'll put up there the cookie monster, because I think everyone knows what a cookie is. Cookies have driven or have become more and more smart now to track device behaviour. I think Matt touched on that this morning with how you can use that in retargeting, and again through DMPs. Then of course we've got the smartphone, and then increasingly the Internet of Things as devices become more connected.
Just on the just quickly on the shop one there too, the positioning stuff. What we're starting to see, there's a really interesting startup in Sydney called Shopper Media Group, and what they're doing is as soon as you walk into the shopping centre now, they're picking up the MAC address from your iPhone, and they're actually mapping where you go and doing this heat mapping as you venture through the shopping centre. And it's pretty common now. But what we're starting to get from this is some of these behavioural insights around, well, firstly, we're starting to learn with the guy with the mop, how well is he actually doing when he goes around the shop at night? Is he actually getting all the floor clean, or is he missing batches? Where it's starting to add value is that things like, if you're a camera shop, it turns out one of the biggest triggers to buying a camera occurs when people buy an overseas trip. So with those sorts of signs, what they're doing is they're waiting to see when people come out of the likes of Flight Centre and those sorts of things. And as they're walking down the corridor of the shopping centre, starting to present them ads that actually have relevance to the activities that they're currently undertaking. The other thing that then does is that data then snowballs over time, so that in 12 months' time from now, you're walking down that same shop. We know that you like to book holidays at this point in time. How about starting to present holiday options to those people as well? And what I find fascinating is that the sort of the signatures that we get around the people that we're looking to engage, the value of those snowball over time. So it's not just what we've got today. It's how can we acquire more and more value to those as things go on. And that's when AI, I think, is really starting to come into its own.
I think that another example, I work for a mobile company now, and then one of the biggest things is real-time location for mobile, and then it's very different to when you go into a website and you just go via IP, this person is sitting on this computer on this location, where mobile can go really complicated on the geolocation. So one of the things that we do is that, for example, you get a jewelry store where they need people to walk in and buy. So what do? We run campaigns on geolocation where we geofence, some stores, and then ping the signs on where these people are actually walking, or if they not necessarily have to go into the store, but they walk around or on the geofence. And what do? We do a footfall attribution as well, where we actually pick 80% of those people that actually have walked into the store or close to the store, and then we show an ad from this particular store. But then we get a 10% of those people that haven't actually been on the store particularly and don't show the ad. And what do? We compare the results of people that actually have seen the ad but haven't been in the store, or people that haven't been in the store and haven't seen the ad. So you can see on how many people actually that don't know the store or haven't been to the store but see the ad and walk straight into the store. So you can see what the success would be if you just show an ad and the person's like not interested, or someone that actually walk past, or even a competitor store. We can geofence people that actually have walked into a competitor store and target those people with those ads. So it's very interesting to know and we use obviously machine learning and artificial intelligence to really get the data and the results for campaigns. And sometimes, surprising enough, when you think you will have like a very obvious result, you don't. So that's another.
It's a great way to get the ROI of ads by doing A/B testing, and also probably gives you some ROI metrics around the value of having a physical presence too.
The AI of physical presence is really fascinating too. So the guys, I don't know if anyone's been to Las Vegas and survived, but the stuff that people don't realise is that all those casinos actually share data between each other up and down the strip. Right? And what they're doing is they've got this incredibly sophisticated system so that when you walk in, they're using facial recognition software to actually to capture you, to create a customer record around you. They might give it a generic name. They're reading things about your age, your sex, all these kind of things, and making assumptions. And then what they'll do is they'll start, as you're walking through the casino, start to present games to you that appeal to that demographic. Now, what happens is if you then start to engage one of those games and you're starting to hit, getting into that flow state, but you pull away and you start to walk away, you could go down the strip, but they'll then start to have that game reappear to you as you walk through the other casinos. And it's really fascinating. Some of the stuff they've been able to do from that, basically they've got it mapped out from the second you get off the airplane in Las Vegas to the moment you're dialing rehab, is pretty much is mapped out in such exquisite detail that all you need to do is give yourself over to the journey. And we've seen that sort of stuff. I know some shops, we talked about the shops, but there's brands that are starting to do that sort of that thing as well. So if you bought this coat, and would you like this belt, or those sorts of things, and they're starting to build those in-store experiences based off a lot of the data that we can tell just off AI. So some of the AI stuff you can actually read. I read the other day, you can read a person's pulse at 10 feet or something like that, which I honestly don't understand how it works, but I think it's phenomenally impressive.
Yeah, cool. All right, we're going to spend a bit of time talking about programmatic media. Who in the audience is familiar with programmatic media? A few. Who actually buys programmatic media, or company does? Yeah, a few. Okay, that's good, but not many. So programmatic media is just a new way to buy media. Think of it like buying shares on the stock market. It goes sort of to try and automate the cost of media in various placements. So the point where an inventory ad on a particular website will be sold in an auction system, a bit like how Google search works. It's quite growing, as you can see there. And Australia is one of the actual leading countries within programmatic media. Now I'm going to ask Priscilla to try and explain this diagram, but it builds on what Matt was talking earlier about you can see the DMP that he was mentioning before lunch up there.
I won't go too deep because it can get very complicated when you go into the programmatic space, but basically, yes, before with the DMP, with the data, the DSPs, the demand-side platforms that agencies usually use, they've got capabilities of overlay targeting, and literally like the opportunities are endless. Some DSPs now even using machine learning and algorithm to even, when you go into a header bidding where instead of using tags or anything, you go into the head of a page and the auction happens over there. What happened is some DSPs actually use the machine learning, use the algorithm to even avoid bidding for their impressions if they think that they're not going to win the auction. So even before they go into the auction, they say, this impression doesn't match with me, so I'm not even going to go there, I'm not going to waste, it's not going to match, so I'm going to trim down the impression because it's most likely I'm not going to win. So they save a lot of infrastructure, cost on that. So that's how they use machine learning. Also, they can use machine learning and algorithm to even optimize campaigns and depending on the KPIs and what targets you actually use for a particular campaign, the algorithm can get so much data in real time and say, this is not a match for my impression, so therefore I'm not going to bid. So there's a lot of ways you can use algorithms and machine learning for the, for the really, really optimize your campaign and get the best result you can do. When you go into the supply side with the publishing side, that's my background, for example, we can use so much data to actually help the agency making a decision on what target or what audience you should be using it, using just previous campaigns or comparing, clients that have a similar product. So you literally go into all the data that the ad server can provide you and just literally make a scope and make, optimizations based on that. We also can use machine learning and algorithms and artificial intelligence on a publishing side to even determine on an article, what article you should be writing, right? So previous at Mamma Mia, what the editors used to do, instead of picking a thing, for example, let's talk about of the Prime Minister today, they would go actually and pick up the data from what users have been reading about it and write something that it's more resonate to them rather than talk about what the topic of the day. So for example, if they've been reading a lot in the last week about dog food, let's put something really fun and just write something about dog food rather than talk about the Prime Minister where every single site is going to talk about it. Also on search, we used to, a lot of data from search engines as well, like Google, for example, and see what are the topics that, or the keywords that the users are actually searching more. And then what we would do is actually optimize the search. Instead of just putting, for example, we talk about The Bachelor, instead of just putting The Bachelor, you would put The Bachelor, Nick Cummings, fell in the pool, like a more longer, keywords. So then therefore when a user go and search instead of The Bachelor, you be the top on the Google search rather than just at the bottom. So there's a lot of uses, and machine learning and artificial intelligence can be served programmatic on a good and a bad way. I think it's just depending on the transparency on how DSPs are using the algorithms. They can easily tweak algorithms to do very bad or earn more money for them and get a markup on all the impressions. There's a lot of scandals in the market at the moment about people marking up impressions or bid caching, for the good of the technology. So you gotta be, if you're working with a media agency, do require transparency, because a lot of the technologies do use artificial intelligence for beneficial them, but they're not benefiting the client.
So just talk through, Priscilla, the different ways you can buy media on, say, Mamma Mia or Daily Mail. So you've got the salesperson.
Yeah, usually every publisher, they will have a sales in-house, and I think a lot of the publishers, the bread and butter is still the direct sales, where they deal directly with the media agency and do the order work, the insertional order. We've got people inside the publishers, like the ad ops person that goes and set manually the campaigns and all that.
And what you find, most of those ad units are often run-of-network, which is...
Yeah, it depends on how big it is. So the likes of Fairfax or Nine, they've got many, many sites, and you can do run-of-network. The likes of Nine, for example, they've got the biggest, literally, due to Microsoft, the data, the sign-up data. So they've got a lot of, name, age, so they can do not only behavior data, but they can do, the age, the agenda and all that kind of stuff. So they've got really rich data that you can leverage there. So for example, supermarket shoppers or high earners people, not so much who's reading, dog articles or that kind of stuff. So you can get really down to the nitty gritty of this data piece.
Cool. All right. So here's an example of the buy-in side for some DMP suppliers. Remember Matt was talking about some of these companies today. On the right there you see a screenshot from a programmatic platform that I was using called the Trade Desk. And you can see there it has a number of different audiences around luxury cars. So what it means is, rather than putting your ad on just a general spray of any person, you can put your ad in front of people who are identified by their web browsing behaviour into one of those audiences, and you pay a premium for it. So you can see there it's about $1.50 to $2 CPM to buy against that audience. So that's one of the ways you can use programmatic to buy smarter, is by audience. Another way is actually contextual targeting. So this is a company called GrapeShot, which has now been bought out by Oracle, which allow you to buy inventory spots against web pages that are contextually relevant for your ad. So if you're selling a car, you may want to place your car ad on a web page that talks about a review of a new car or something like that. It also includes brand safety. Do you want to add anything to that, Priscilla?
Yeah, so there's two ways of buying these days. You can, on a programmatic, you can do buy on audience, so people that actually are probably interested regardless of what they read, and you can do contextual targeting, which basically, it doesn't really matter who is actually reading, but your ads is relevant to the page that it's been served. So contextual targeting you can do, you can talk about, yes, cars, and you can go into any site or any network that has specific keywords, so you can put as many as 50 to 60 keywords related and create a segment and use that overlaying your campaign. So basically your ad will show on pages and sites the articles that have those keywords. This is very, I would say data is very rich, and publishers do consider that, like, they hold that data very, very close to their heart, so they do charge a premium CPM for that.
But the great news is when you're using a programmatic platform, all of these metrics are tracked, so you can start to optimize for the particular placements that give you the greatest cost per conversion.
Yeah, so you can literally set up two ways. You can set up one with just general people, and then you can set up one based on our audience, and then compare the two of them, who is giving more ROI, and then optimize based on that.
So most of you will have smartphones and you'll see ads on smartphones, but did you know you can buy ads on smartphones only across a subgrouping of apps? So for example, if you were a running company, maybe a Nike or a Hoka One One or Adidas, you can buy your ads only in apps that relate to that word through, this is a company called Pushspring. So some interesting kind of emerging data companies that are helping optimize in terms of media placement using AI. Who uses A/B testing with their campaigns? Yeah, a few. So typical A/B testing can be changing the copy or changing the creative, but what's starting to emerge now is A/B testing across campaigns, across channels. So this is a startup that actually allows you to test campaigns through different channels like Facebook, Google, Instagram, etc., and compare the best outcomes to help give you intelligence to see where to do further campaigns.
Nearly 12 months ago, I was over in Orlando at Microsoft's global conference at Ignite, and I was going from the hotel back to the airport, and there was another guy in the taxi queue, and so we shared a taxi, and it turned out this guy was one of the heads of Microsoft's AI initiative. And the poor bastard, it was the longest taxi ride he ever had. I just sat there and I just hammered him for questions for about full 30 minutes until he literally fell out at the airport and then tried to run away from me. But he was telling me about really interesting stuff around how with voice recognition, we've kind of got to this point at the moment where one of the big tests has been, can you replace the person at the reception desk, right? So somebody rings up your company and at what point does the person that's ringing up no longer know that they're actually speaking to a mechanical entity?
The Turing test, right?
What was that?
The Turing test, whatever it's called.
Yeah, the Turing test, yeah. And so, and he said, what he said was really fascinating was that we talked about 12 months ago. He said about 18 months ago, we managed to get to the point where it was an unskilled person. So we'd just taken someone off the street, put them in the reception. They were at that level. And then, but 2 months before, well, so that was 18 months ago, and then he said something like, I think it was 14 months ago, we actually got to the point where it was a qualified person that had taken that role. So what we're seeing in terms of voice and voice recognition is we've come from this area where there was a lot of lag, it was really stilted, it wasn't particularly good, but we're actually now starting to hit this critical mass piece. And the ability for us to do things like voice recognition is actually quite extraordinary. So I don't know if anyone's had the experience where they've just been talking with their partner or with friends about a particular thing, they've jumped onto their phone, fired up Facebook, and suddenly there's a commercial for the thing that they've just been talking about. Has anyone experienced that? Yeah, right. So we've now got this point where voice is become the next competitive landscape, right? So there was some stat about how many people have Amazon's in-house listening thing, or
Alexa.
Alexa and the same with Google, right? So what we're actually getting to this, we've started to get to this tipping point of voice. Is not only can we interpret, but we can actually start to build these virtual sort of responses to it too. And there was a comedian just not so long ago that jumped on stage with an AI bot and did a complete improv show with the AI bot as well, like in real time. So the level of sophistication that is happening today is actually kind of exciting, I think.
I think it also has implications for your content. You see on the right there, the questions that people ask these Google Home or Siri or your phones are different based on different demographics. So if you've got products that relate to some of those things, it's worth having content on your website that then the search engine will use to actually serve up your content in answers to those questions. So speaking of chatbots, that guy on the right, by the way, is a guy in Russia. He's in a dementia facility, Alzheimer's facility, and they're using chatbots, or little helpers, if you like, to help the guys remember things that they've forgotten. So there are some quite good health, social applications for these things as well.
Just jump in chatbots for a second. We talked really briefly about the Cambridge Analytica, sort of creating those signatures around interests and things like that. What we're now seeing is kind of the taking of those sorts of signatures and applying them into the construction of chatbots. You can have multiple personas, like you can have chatbots that are dedicated to a particular persona. And what we're also starting to see, it's really fascinating, is coming through some of the research, is the way that we as humans form relationships with these chatbots, or any AI instance, actually. We've seen a few instances where people know that they're actually talking to a chatbot, but they actually start to give it human characteristics and build human relationships with it, to the detriment of their other relationships, because they find the chatbot so comforting, even though they're completely aware that it's a chatbot. We did a thing, has anyone heard of Baby X? Yeah, so it's a thing that Auckland University did, and it was a very sophisticated form of chatbot, right? It was a baby on a TV screen, and it was an AI baby, and cut a long story short, if you went away from the screen, it started to get anxiety and started to cry, and if you came back again, its pupils would dilate and it started to goo and gar, and they were teaching it things and stuff like that. What was really fascinating is we demoed this through University of Sydney Business School with a room full of people. And what they'd built into the chatbot, into this Baby X, was that if it did something good, in its wiring, it got this shot of dopamine. But in order to teach it something, if it got something wrong, you had a button, you could give it electric shock. Now, completely, arguably sadistic, but really fascinating, was the fact that we had a room full of people. When people were seeing that it was a baby, the first time he hit the electric shock button, people were horrified. People were on edge, ready to storm the stage to stop him from giving this virtual baby a virtual electric shock, right? So it's really fascinating. When he changed the face to a cardboard box, no one gave a shit, right? You can zap that thing all day. But it's really fascinating, as we start to give these things human traits, we're starting to propagate out components of our brand into segments that we think are important. And people build genuine relationships with those things. And that can be a chatbot, it can be an avatar, it can be all sorts of things.
Yeah, which comes up to privacy. Who's opted out of the health record? A few? Who's opted in, or who doesn't know what the health record is? There's some significant privacy concerns, I think, with AI. I think as Scott mentioned about your voice being picked up, how much data that kids today will grow up in the digital age with their whole life being digitally recorded almost.
Totally.
AI does have some limitations. Is that a chihuahua or a blueberry muffin?
The thing I love about it is with all the sophistication of AI, right? And we're going gangbusters right now, it still can't tell the difference between a chihuahua and a blueberry muffin. And so when we're worried about AI kicking us out of our jobs and things like that, that's probably going to happen to some people or a few. But realise that AI, as it currently sits, is really good within a context. Right? So if you build the recommendations engine they use for Netflix, you can't pick it up and use it for a Woolworths site. right? It's used within a context. It's not necessarily directly applicable. What was really fascinating in talking to the guy in that taxi was he said the two biggest issues they're facing in AI at the moment, or they're struggling with, one was, how do you do version control on a body of intelligence? Now, for me, that just blew my mind. Like, you've got this AI thing, you've written it, it goes out, it builds all this learning and extrapolates out. How do you do version control on that? And if you wind it back, how do you then, how do you go back to version whatever it was? And they said the other thing that they have issues with is actually communicating what it is that the AI can do. Now, we do a lot of work with the likes of Facebook and Workplace, and I was chatting to some of the senior guys there, like really senior, reporting to Zuckerberg guys, like smart people that you hope would have their finger on the pulse. And we're talking about the algorithm that drove those central news feeds, and the guy just says, he turns to his engineers and goes, I don't understand how it works, to you? And they're like, eh. So there's this thing with AI that it's very good within a context, but as we start to extrapolate it out, we're not sure of what it actually does. It becomes this mystical black box. So if there's ambiguity around AI, realise that I think it's part of the territory, I think,
Yeah, cool.
and that it is limited.
We might sort of wrap it up and we'll have some questions. What's a couple of things that you can offer in terms of how the audience could leverage AI marketing? Maybe start with you, Priscilla.
I think it's part of the decision making. I think using data and using artificial intelligence now these days, you can't help and not using it to make a decision on who you go, who's your audience, what platform you're going to use. I think that's you can't not use artificial intelligence these days. It's like you have to rely on data and previous behaviors and who's your audience to target the right people. Otherwise, you just can't get an ROI out of it.
Yeah, Scott?
Mine would be, I think it was this lady that said it from HubSpot this morning, and she was great. She talked about just the systems that are available, right? There's a lot of plugins now that have AI components, and they're really simple. And it can start with a chatbot and decision tree. And my takeaway, I think, or my advice is that, like, you might start with a chatbot and a decision tree, but that's not where it ends up, right? The important thing is to actually get in there, start to take action, and realise that anything that you build will snowball over time. The understanding will snowball over time. So for me, I think the biggest takeaway is to actually start with something and start simple.
Yeah, nice. And mine would be, as marketers, we're supposed to be intellectually curious, and I think there's never been a better time to test your hunches. So keep having hunches about audiences, markets, products, and test them. And then use those analytics that you get back to sort of potentially find new markets, new audiences, and new channels to sell your products. So any questions? Have we got time for a couple of questions?
Yep.
In regards to the platform's ability to use our data to benefit our competitors and our competitors' data to benefit us, and that issue. And secondarily, it involves giving over a decent level of control in terms of what you can do, and there's a whole lot of unknown that's kind of somewhere deep in the AI somewhere or what have you. So I guess in regards to the control, how have you found it best to manage that kind of giving over of kind of key business, and key marketing tools and insight?
You don't have to give away your IP, but I think increasingly more and more data is public anyway, right? So you want to actually leverage as much market data as you can. If you're selling ice creams, potentially, or you can now with programmatic, only put your ads on when the temperature's above 30 degrees. So there's some pretty clever stuff you can do. There was a test at Sydney Airport where they put ads for Mercedes only shown when a Porsche was coming down the road as a sort of a competitive swap. So it recognised the Porsche and then puts up, you should be driving a Mercedes type of thing. But I think you want to hold your IP close, but you do want to leverage as much as you can, because if you don't, your competitors will anyway.
It's a big question. Like, how much control do we want to give our robotic overlords? I don't have necessarily the answer to that question, because I think you guys are probably a better place for the marketing, but it is something that we're struggling with across the board with AI.
Yeah.
So it's not just unique to this situation. Like, it's something that is being asked across the board.
Cool.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please thank our panel, Ian, Priscilla, and Scott.